So as we dive into this podcast here, this Battletech podcast, I want to build your confidence a little bit. Your choice as a mech warrior, put battle value aside, your choice of a heavy mech. This is your family mech. This is what you have inherited. You've been on a number of successful campaigns. You have that mech in mind. For me, it would be the Warhammer. Wish it had a little bit more armor, but 2 PPCs. I love that damage. I love that redundancy. And it has an answer for every range bracket. Not as scary as a Stalker, certainly. Not as scary as an Awesome. But a Warhammer still got some punch on there. Marauder, you've got your heavy mech chosen. Your mission, urban pacification, urban renewal. You're going into a city fight type environment. And there's some reports of some mechs. Naturally, you're going to expect to encounter a couple of mechs. Infantry, obviously, and maybe a mix of vehicles on there. But you're feeling pretty confident because you've got a 2nd and 3rd Lance backing you up. And you're walking into your heavy mech. You make your way in the city. You make a right off the main street. You're going to engage some targets, but you don't have confirmation. You turn that corner, and you are face to face with a short-range missile carrier. Let that sink in for a moment. Time stops. Do you want to eat 10 point-blank range? The SRM carrier has not moved. And now on the table, maybe it's in the hex, maybe it's hidden in the building. Your movement modifiers are not really that high because you've had to kind of navigate through the buildings. You have to navigate through the alleys and stuff. So what are you looking at, a +1 or a +2 on your movement modifier for hexes? I've got +0 because I haven't moved. I'm parked point blank range. 10 SRM 6s hitting at you. Let that sink in for a moment. We're firing off everything. And that's only one. Imagine if there are 2. Imagine if there's 3. 2 would be realistic. 3, I'd love 3, I'd love 4, but now we're getting into issues of battle value and stuff like that. But a pair of SRM carriers. Interesting. So that is my vote. The podcast, the focus of this is to ask in the Battletech universe, what is your vote? Ground units, vehicles. We're going to limit it just to that. Hardest vehicle, hardest tank to play. And out of all the games that I've played, I love the short-range missile carrier, but it is by far the most challenging and the hardest vehicle to play. First off, because it really only favors 100% urban pacification, urban warfare, maybe something with a lot of hills and valleys, but 90% of the hex maps out there, it's just really not going to work. Because with the hex maps, you have cover, you have elevation, you have patches of it, but then there's open space on there. You need to get point blank. You want to get point blank, no movement, and just unload everything. So we have that going on. On the opposite side, the SRM carrier is so deadly. It is. Against an undamaged mech, it's going to put the hurt on. And if you don't eliminate it that turn, it's going to cripple your mech. If you've already taken some damage, it has a spread of missiles. It's going to crit seek. It's going to open up internals. It's really, really nasty with what it does. So when we have a unit like this that is so hyped and so up there with potential, it needs to be engaged. Your opponent needs to direct their attention to it, and they can't let it live. So sometimes we have this idea of frustration where we're really excited about a very potent unit in Battletech. And of course, this is a universal rule across every war game. X-Wing Miniatures, Wings of Glory, Warhammer 40,000, Chain of Command. You have a unit that is so deadly, you're psyched to play it. You're pumped to play it. You want to see that action on the table. And then it usually gets blown up very, very quickly because your opponent has to commit maximum resources to that. So A, you have to find a way to counter that. And B, if you can't counter that because they just overload everything, then for those 1 or 2 turns, where can you capitalize on other weaknesses that your opponent has? If I'm going head-to-head in Battletech and the first turn you throw everything you have against that SRM carrier or my 2 carriers, that means the rest of your units are not shooting at my mechs, they're not moving at my mechs, they're not potentially making physical attacks against my mechs. I need to capitalize on that. So the challenge here, of course, is understanding Being conservative, knowing when to commit with the SRM carrier makes it challenging because the moment it shows itself, it's going to take a lot of hate. And then the third reason why this is my vote so challenging to play is because it only really works 100% in a close urban environment. And even then, there's a lot of hazards in there. There's infantry. It doesn't have a lot of armor. It's subject to a lot of motive hits. You got to be really careful with it because it needs to slowly kind of inch up there and get it point blank. So infantry are a threat. Other vehicles are a threat. Light VTOL support like warriors and other things like that. Massive threat on there, but a very interesting, potent, powerful, and when that thing fires off, depends on what side, the receiving end or the giving end, very interesting, very challenging. It's one of my favorite units, absolutely. Your vote for the hardest, most challenging vehicle to play in the Battletech universe.